Chapter 3 Manage the Psychology of Investing. Picture this: you're riding a really fun trail. There's a light drizzle, but you've got your bike under control and it's going fine. It's a little bumpy, but you're feeling on top of things. The trail takes a turn, and suddenly, right in front of you, there's a steep drop that you weren't anticipating. You're on the new ground, and your heart thumps in your chest. You weren't expecting this. What can you do from taking a nasty spill? What you decide in the next few seconds will mean the difference between having a really fun story to tell at the end of the ride or needing a visit to the ER. What's the one factor determining which one it will be? Sure, it may depend on how good a rider you are, whether you know this trail or it's the first time riding it, how good your protective equipment is, and a dozen other factors. The number one thing keeping you safe out there in life really is the confidence of knowing you can manage anything. Not cockiness, mind you. One quick way to get hurt is to go hurling yourself off a cliff because you'll figure it out. No, we're talking about a realistic and sober assessment of the risks you're facing and the best moves in response to them. Psychology. So much of life comes down to that. And in few other areas of life can you see it more clearly than in investing. It can be a daunting task, figuring out how to make your money grow, yet not being afraid of losing. It's easy to become overwhelmed by the fear of risk. It's natural to feel anxious and nervous before riding over a technical and challenging section. But there is a great feeling of accomplishment waiting for you at the end. The same is true for investing. Those who take measured risks are rewarded over time. The psychology of risk. The fear of risk is one of the main points that many investors face. However, risk is not just about losing money. It's important to understand the concept of risk and how it applies to investing. The biggest question I answer that nobody asks is, what is risk? Nobody asks this question because most people believe they already know. They think risk is losing money. To quote the great Warren Buffett, risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. Note that the Oracle of Omaha doesn't say it's investing in stocks in a down market or keeping your money in the market when everybody else is pulling it out, or some of the other things you may have been conditioned to think are risky. Buffett, who as of this writing is worth more than $100 billion, is pointing us to the great importance of being wary not of risk, but lack of preparedness. But the good news is that you don't need to become a financial advisor to effectively deal with your money. You need to pay attention, sure, and it helps to have someone on your team who's seen risk before and knows how to manage it, like a good financial advisor. I strive every day to help investors plan for retirement and understand how and why they are invested to achieve their financial goals. Investing is all psychology. Want to know a secret? The main thing of value I bring to the table for my clients is mastery of the psychology of investing and of helping people navigate both the upswings and the rough patches. Look, lots of this investing advice is on Google. You can seek it out. You can go to your public library. You can get the information you need. Information is not the problem anymore. You can read this book, and I can give you a list of 100 other books, and you'll get a PhD in retirement planning. You can learn the track records of the best portfolio managers. You can do all of those things. It's all publicly available. But what good will it do? You may be surprised to learn that it probably wouldn't do as much good as what you think. Because the only thing I provide at the end of the day is all the missing pieces of information that you don't have. I live in this world, so you don't have to. You don't have to spend half of your life trying to figure this all out. The other, infinitely more important thing I offer is to help you behaviorally make the right choices and prevent you from making the big mistakes. This can mean keeping you from getting too greedy when you're at the top of the market, because eventually that will become the big mistake. It can mean helping you stay steady during shaky economic times. It's keeping you in that bandwidth of safety to achieve a return that will get you to retirement and stay in a portfolio that will keep you retired. We'll talk about the biggest risk in retirement later in this book. We'll talk about inflation, which is the erosion of purchasing power, and what happens when each of your dollars buys less bread, an issue we've all been dealing with of late. But for now, know that this is all part of the psychology of investing. So, what I like to do is behavioral portfolio management, but also behavioral advising of the actual client. The client always controls the money. It's your money. You can always do whatever you want. You don't have to take the advice in this book to heart, or as my client, listen to me. I'm by no means infallible, but I have an objectivity about your money that it's tough for you to have about it. Part of the reason the psychology of investing well is so tough is the way we feel about taking risks. Feeling anxious and nervous is normal. When people think of going up to the front of a room and talking to a group of strangers over a lunch, most people feel anxious and nervous. Some people get a really nasty feeling in the pit of their gut. Many people rank public speaking above death when listing their fears. Even some of those who engage in public speaking all the time feel this way. Count me among them. I can't think of a single time when I got up in front of a crowd, even my own friends and family, and didn't feel a bit anxious and nervous. It's just part of the human condition. And it's part of that primal feeling that comes with realizing that if I get up there, I could make a fool of myself. I could get laughed at. With finances, a similar kind of anxiety can pop up. We feel a responsibility for our futures. We don't want to make mistakes. Finances represent our hopes, our dreams, our obligations to our most important people, like our spouse and children. Who wants to fail at something like that? But there are all kinds of risks we've taken in life. We've been afraid to speak to a crowd, but we've done it anyway. There are also risks when you're out riding your bike. If you're mountain biking, there's tons of risks. It's all beautiful to look at, and being out in the fresh air feels amazing. But every corner, every root coming out of the ground, every loose rock is a potential danger. If you've decided that staying indoors forever isn't an option, as I have, then it comes down to taking measured risks, using skill and expertise, and managing your behavior. Cornering, handling risk. One of the top skills we have to master when riding a bike on a challenging trail is cornering. If you're on a road, you probably won't have a ton of extreme cornering. Straight roads are more gradual. But on a mountain bike trail, well, which is a better analogy for a lifetime of investing, you have to understand a lot about cornering to be successful. Corners are risks. You can ride over just about anything, but when you come to a corner, you've got all kinds of things to figure out. You don't know how deep that corner is or how loose the dirt or gravel is. You can't wait to see what's coming. If there are any riders coming up, that's another risk. When you come into a corner, you're trying to get finished in a reasonable fashion. If you go too slow in the corner, your momentum will take you too long to turn, and you're probably going to wreck. Even the best of circumstances, your time on that route will be really long. If you correlate to retirement, you could take low risks in your investments, but who wants to retire at 75 or 80? Because it's taking so long to save up enough to retire comfortably. Nobody wants to do that. It's a choice, sure. Is it safer? Yep, there's a lot of risks. Far fewer scary corners. I liken that to putting money in bonds. It sounds like it's safer, but it may not be the best choice along the way. So when you come into a corner, the first point is to know your line. What is the moment like when you come to a tough corner you didn't foresee, and there are only a few seconds to make a decision? You have to do a lot of things in that time. First, you let go. You can't be in your head at a moment like this. You want to be a little bit wide, because if you come in too tight on that corner, you've got to turn and you're going to wreck probably. It's better to go a little bit wide, not high, but a little bit wider, because it gives you more vision around the corner. What does this have to do with investing? Well, as in biking, you've got to look where you're going so you can be ready to pivot when the road changes unexpectedly. You need to evaluate the road conditions and investments, how loose it is, how banked, what is the trail condition, what is the economic out, where are we in the economic cycle? This is so important to understand. If you see a bunch of loose dirt and it's really steep, sharp corner, but there's no embankment, you're going to have to slow down. If you don't, it's going to be really ugly and it's going to hurt. There are times in the economic cycle when we have to pump the brakes. And I'm not saying we change everything in the portfolio necessarily. Pumping the brakes may mean experiencing some downturns in the markets, knowing that they're not an anomaly, but a part of the ride. We're going to lose a little value in the account. But here's something I'd tell my clients, which is not intuitive to some people. The only way to permanently book that loss is to sell on the downturn. Temporary declines have to be worked through. They're just like corners. They may be really sharp and make you take in a breath real quick and steady yourself, but they're a part of the process. There's also the question of momentum. The more you have when going through the sharp turn without losing control, the better the corner. If you go in slow, you have to manually steer. The corner will seem like a bigger obstacle, and you may have to be in it for longer. But it's also just inefficient. And if you come out of that corner and there's a hill, you have no momentum to get into the next phase of the market or of the trail. You need some skills. You need to have the right portfolio, the right managers, the right plan. That will help you keep some momentum through the economic cycle so you can hit the up market, which almost always follows the down market. So how do we do that? What are these skills? When you're riding, you'll learn real quick that if you're going to take that corner, you have to figure out the center of gravity, because you want that tire and tread to grip, but you also need to go through the corner. And if you're straight up on the bike all the time, that corner becomes very difficult. All you have is the handlebars to steer at that point. You'll have to learn how to lean and keep the center of gravity. If you're going to lean your bike, you've got to offset. For instance, if I'm leaning to the left, my right foot has to be all the way down to press my weight down on the right side, and I need to shift the bike that way. So you need to separate yourself from the bike. I don't mean flying off of it. Just separate your body from it enough to achieve equilibrium so you can still stick the tires to the ground, but you can lean into the corner, and the bigger the berm, the less you have to lean and press with the opposite foot. So you're leaning to the left. You're going to have your right foot all the way down on the pedal, shifting the bike one way and your upper body weight the other way until you have an equilibrium. You have to feel that with your experience. Getting back on the bike and overcoming fear. What's all of these biking technicalities? Whether I'm inspiring you to go out and dust off the old bike, or you have no intentions of ever hitting the trail, it's an apt metaphor for investing your retirement savings in the stock market. Sometimes it's glorious. Sometimes it's hair-raising. Doing it solo is possible, but not as effective as doing it with an experienced guide. Here's a thing to keep in mind. People are always saying the world's going to end. They said it, 9/11 was the end of the world. The crash in 2008 was the end of the world. COVID-19 was the end of the world. The war in Ukraine is going to be the end of the world. This is not to minimize those very real, painful times in history. I'm talking about this in a strictly economic sense. The end of the economic world has been forecast many, 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 many times during my career alone, and way back before I was in knee socks too. It's always going to be different this time, they say. We're never going to come back from this. But that's just fear. When you have a diversified portfolio that's well managed, you can weather downturns, which generally turn out to be temporary. People fear loss much more than they hope for gain. People fear the bear markets, aka the downturns, and don't always notice the long-term gain of 50 years in bull markets. It's just how we're wired. It's essential to know your limitations when investing. Of course, at the end of the day, you're the one who's got to be comfortable with your plan. It's your money, but I work hard to help my clients see the ways they're leaving money on the table by being too conservative or tentative in their investing. Investing in funds can be emotional. So it's important to invest in a way that you can handle. As an advisor, I have responsibility to make sure my clients and readers get a good long-term return. But it's also my job to ensure the client doesn't panic out of the market. Some individuals do not have an appetite for swings in the market, and those individuals will have to work harder and longer. But at least they won't be blown out of the market by buying and selling at the worst times, which would be more devastating to their returns than a heavier allocation to bonds. That's why leveraging collective knowledge is a critical aspect of investing. Find a team of professionals to help you along the way. Insurance, investments, financial planning, taxes, and estate planning are all critical components that a financial dream team can handle. When you need a new roof, you call a roofer. When you need medicine, you go to a medical professional. When it comes to growing your wealth, it can make a lot of sense to work with someone who spends their whole life learning about the bumps and corners on the road, who can give you a heads up when it's time to lean into a corner and remind you not to panic. Get yourself a team that knows not just how to keep it together during the scary parts, but also where the most fun, exhilarating trails are. Life is full of ups and downs, but if you do it right, that's one of the best parts about it.